All right, welcome everyone to today's guest interview. Today we're sitting down with Tracy Whitmore. She is a therapist and therapeutic coach for the LGBT plus Q community of adults and parents. Tracy, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's good to see you again. So today, for those listening, I want to talk about being queer in the current political climate, and we'll kind of get to that in a minute. Tracy's a dear peer of mine that I respect, and I've actually interviewed her before on an IG live, so it's nice to see her again. Tracy, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you? Tell us where you're from, what do you do, just the basics.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I'm from Australia. You might pick up the accent, but I live in Vancouver, Canada at the moment and have been there for the last few years. And but I have my own business. It's called Indigo Journey, and that focuses on supporting parents of queer kids and supporting queer adults through life coaching, health and wellness coaching, and therapy. And I also am the author of a book that I wrote for parents so that they can better support their kids, which is called It's About You Too, Reducing the Overwhelm for Parents of LGBTQ plus kids. I've been working with queer young people, so 10 to 25-year-olds. I did that for about 10 years in Australia, and then started my own business supporting queer adults and supporting parents of queer kids, because I understand that you know we are going to do a lot better in the world if we can stay connected to our family, and if our family can come on board and love and support us unconditionally. So that's kind of the two areas that I focus my work on, and I'm now doing that in Canada. But I support people across the globe. So yeah.
Tracy, you were one of the first people that I had come across that had supported parents too. And like, quite frankly, I wish I would have seen your work when I was coming out, because like that wasn't there for. I mean, I wasn't aware
Yeah.
of it. Like I did the best, but anyway, yeah, that has
And
stuck out.
that's exactly why I did that, because when I was working with young people, I was getting contacted by a lot of parents wanting to know where they could get some support, where they could get some information. I'm working with queer kids, and they're talking to me about their parents' struggles, and their parents, not really understanding their parents' struggles, but their parents' behaviors, I suppose, as a result of their struggles, that was really impacting them. And so, I wanted to kind of fill that gap. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for today's episode, one of the I got this message on Instagram, and it basically said from someone, "I worry about the future of civil rights for gay couples given
Mm.
the political climate." And that's really what made me want to talk about this topic today. For those listening, like, full disclaimer, Tracy nor myself are political commentators or political experts, rather. We're just going
Mm.
to focus on the emotional piece of it. And yes, there's, the reality of the situation is what it is. But I think for those listening, we'll just kind of focus on the emotional piece of it. This is not therapy by any means. So if you have any mental health concerns, just please consult your local providers in your state. So Tracy, I'll just kind of loop you in. So for me, I'm okay now. Like, I'm not too stressed out. Me personally, I know a lot of friends and community members are. I was
Mm-hmm.
feeling a lot of anxiety during the election, frankly, and I talked to my mom about it. Um, Leading up to it, with all the debates and all of that, I was doom scrolling at night and the whole thing. Once the
Yeah,
election
yeah.
happened and we like found out the winner, I honestly was like fine, because it was like finally at least I knew. And I'm like, okay,
Mm.
I've seen it before with this guy, and I don't watch the news anymore. And like, um, I guess let me just ask you that question. Do you think it's valid to just like disconnect, or is that a form of avoiding?
I think that's a really great way to take care of yourself. And I've been doing that for years. I don't watch mainstream news, or I very rarely watch mainstream news. And I mean, I've got an online business, so I have to be on social media a lot. If I didn't have an online business, I wouldn't even be on social media at the moment, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's a really valid way to, yes, it's avoiding things, but it's avoiding things that are going to escalate your anxiety and stress and worries and concerns. And it's something that you actually can't do anything about now. I think prior to the election,
Mm.
getting accurate information to inform what steps you want to take, whether you want to vote and who you want to vote for and all of that, I think is really important. Though, watching mainstream news and scrolling is not necessarily getting you accurate information either. So we need to be informed. I think it's
Mm.
important. We need
Mm.
to be informed. We need to stay aware of what's going on. So maybe tapping in every so often to somewhere where you believe is fairly accurate, providing fairly accurate information, but definitely not on a daily basis, like maximum once a week. And I don't know that I'd even do that, to be honest, around this time, because you asked me to talk about how we can manage this situation, and that would be one of the first things that I would
Wow.
suggest is back off on watching media, all media, social media, mainstream media, like all of that.
Well,
So very valid.
okay. Yeah, well, that's a good point because there isn't really much we can control. The only thing I mean, yeah, sure, we could do advocacy and all of that, but 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, like in my bed, like there's not much I can do there.
Yeah.
But what I can do is like control the inputs because like that is gonna like cause my anxiety and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And it means that you're not showing up in the world, or you're not able to show up in the world how you want to show up, because you're exhausting yourself. If you're,
mm, mhm,
staying up late at night,
mhm.
then your sleep is not going to be good quality. If you're scrolling at 11 o'clock at night, it's with stuff that's elevating your anxiety and your stress levels. And so then when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to be as effective as what you could otherwise be in whatever it is that you choose to do, if you are able to take some steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that, and for those like it's not that I don't care, right? And like for those listening, like it's not that
Mm.
we don't care, but like I just don't want to, the president elect doesn't need like more fame, in my opinion. Like I've already my power is here.
Yeah.
Like that's where I notice. Like my power is here. So
Yeah. In your heart, in your body.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So Tracy, how for those of us that are feeling fear, anxiety, feelings of uncertainty, what else should we be doing? One way we mentioned disconnecting, totally valid. Anything
Yeah.
else for those types of emotions?
Yeah. I think because the fear, that feeling of uncertainty, the worry, the anxiety, they're all really valid. So first of all, I think acknowledging that, because we are living in a time of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, the bottom line is we always are in some level of uncertainty, because we never know what, the next
Mm,
5 minutes or the next day or the next year is going to hold, for sure. But in different situations, and this being a big one, those feelings of uncertainty are much bigger, because we don't we've got some evidence on some things that are likely to happen, and also I think a lot of people are thinking things are going to be worse as well.
mhm.
And so really, like, acknowledging for yourself that these feelings are valid, and not trying to push them away, not trying to get away from them, not judging yourself or criticizing yourself for them, not trying to convince yourself not to feel them. Because one of the big things that I talk about when I'm working with people is, where we focus our attention is what we get more of. And so if we're focusing our attention on, um, you know, the feeling, let's talk about the feelings of uncertainty. I'm feeling uncertain and scared about that person that wrote into you
Mhm.
about civil rights and
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
marriage equality and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we focus on that, I'm worried about losing this. Maybe the person that you're talking about is married and they're worried about that being, all the laws being undone, and so that negates their marriage. If we're focusing on that, that's what you're going to get more of inside your head. You're going to get a lot more of those thoughts. Even if we're trying to push it away or stop it, your attention is focused on it. So it is going to just keep cycling through. When we can take a few deep breaths and give ourselves some love, practice self-compassion. That's my motto. I just actually created or designed some t-shirts and a hoodie. I don't know if you saw them, Andrew, online, that literally says practice self-compassion across the front of it. I'm like, I need to get something out in the world that is going to help the person that's wearing it and anybody that they come across. Reminders to practice self-compassion, because this current climate is difficult for many of us. And we need to be kind to ourselves around that. And so, if you are able to acknowledge those feelings and validate them, and then look to what can I do to help myself in this situation, in this difficult time, rather than trying to push it away or stop it or ignore it or avoid it.
Yeah.
And there's, so, we can talk about that if you like, about all the different things that we can do to help, because what we're really looking to do is calm our nervous system so that
Yeah.
we can manage these difficult situations and this difficult time more effectively.
What's funny is I actually felt my nervous system a little bit activated a couple minutes ago as like we first got started. So I had to just like listen
Yeah,
to your voice, your soothing voice. So yeah. So I wrote down some things that you were saying for those listening. So I wrote down acknowledge, number two, breathing, and then the third thing would be like, what can I do to help myself right now? That sounds like a
yeah,
good formula.
yeah,
Because one thing, like I'm looking at notes that people have sent in, like fear, anxiety, feelings of uncertainty for sure. But for me, I do just feel, for me, I feel a little bit hurt, concerned, and a little bit like unsafe. I'll use that word lightly, and I think other people would resonate with that, like feeling a little bit hurt and concerned. I don't like
yeah,
seeing the news. So the news is not fair, in my opinion. And then also just social media memes and all that, just short content. I don't like seeing, um, you know, uh, Kamala Harris like being made fun of. Like that hurts my feelings, frankly, because that's someone I
mm,
respected. And so it just hurt. But again, it's
yeah,
probably that same framework, right? Of just like I'm allowed to feel hurt, you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I'm going to jump in around that safety
Hmm.
part as well that you said. Like, your experience is that you're feeling a little bit unsafe. I'm not sure if I picked up on this correctly, but you appear to be a little bit reluctant to say that. But
Wow.
I know for sure, and I think you know as well, that a big part of our community feels very, very unsafe. And that's really valid, particularly the trans community, and
Yeah.
parents of queer kids being of any age are feeling. I have in my private Facebook group that is for parents, that we, in the days leading up to and after the election. And I don't talk about politics at all in
Sure.
there, but I checked in around how people were feeling, and parents are terrified for their kids. And so, and I know from trans folk that I'm working with and that I'm in contact with, and you can see it all over social media as well. People are terrified, and I think that is also valid. So some people are feeling a little bit nervous and a little bit unsafe, and some people are right to the other extreme and
Mm.
feeling feeling
Mm.
really, really scared. And I think it, again, that I like that you call it a formula. It is important that we've got to acknowledge that it is all valid. It is, because we don't know what's going to happen, and some things we do know, and
Mm.
they're scary,
Yeah.
particularly for the trans community. It is, we know some things about, what this is going to look like for them, and it is scary. So again, we go back to how can we, I mean, there are practical things for the trans community to be, steps for them to be taking, and I'm not an expert
Sure.
in the law in the US, and it depends on what state people are in and all of that. But there are people out there doing some great work around what steps to take. And I just read something this morning around making sure, depending on what state you're in at least, but maybe in every state, to be making sure that you get your documents all in order
Hmm.
before the 20th of January, being, a passport in your actual name, and with gender markers and all of that kind
Hmm.
of stuff. So
Hmm.
there's the practical things that people can do that, depending on their circumstance, that will help, because when we're able to take action toward what we're aiming for, then that can feel more empowering as
Mm.
well, rather than um, only moving away from, like focusing on what we
Mm.
we want to move away from. And that's going to be important for some people too. A lot of people are going to move
Yeah.
if they're able to, and that the sad reality is some people are not able to.
Yeah.
But, well, I mean, it's a sad reality that people feel
Hmm.
like they have to as well. So if people can take actions, even if they're the smallest actions, if people can't move, what can you do? Looking for the practical steps, the actions you can take in the direction that is going to move you towards what you want and need, which, the
Hmm.
need is safety.
Mm.
Can you get any elements of safety increased? Getting people around you that are, allies, and people around you that are safe people. If your circle of people are also not safe for you, then doing your best to increase, the having allies around you. Some people might only be able to do that online. um, hopefully they can do it a little bit in person as well. But I am talking, kind of one end of the spectrum. But wherever you're at and whatever your experience is, taking actions in the direction that you want and need to move in is important. And then we've got the kind of self-compassion, how to take care of yourself, which we can talk about in more detail. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you picked up how I was feeling, and acknowledging how, like, it just happened live, like just acknowledging that I do feel unsafe. And you even notice my reluctance to say that word. And I think it's because for me personally, like, I think of some, people in my head, I don't think they're trying to make me feel unsafe. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like, just acknowledging, like, yeah, I do feel a little, no, see, it's still there. I do feel unsafe. Like, just acknowledging that. Um,
Yeah. And how does that feel in your body to acknowledge that?
When I acknowledge it, it feels better. Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like a load off a little bit. Um,
It makes a big difference, even though we're talking about like well, I don't know, on the surface, if I just what we just did then,
mhm.
you're like, oh, a little bit unsafe. And then what my feedback to you about that has encouraged you to then own, actually, yeah, I do
Yeah,
feel unsafe.
yeah,
To listeners, they might be like, how on earth is that going to feel better?
yeah.
Because I thought I only felt a little bit
Oh,
unsafe, and now I'm owning that I actually feel unsafe. But the truth is that you felt that
yeah.
way no matter
Before
what you were
it
admitting.
was just I
Yeah,
was just unconscious about it. Like, it
yeah.
was the
And
it
so
was
now you can do something.
it like yeah, and the emotion like sets better. Like, it sits. it's settled rather. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was acknowledged. So anyway, yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Well,
And I know for myself, I live in Canada. I don't live in the US. It's very close to the border though. I I live in Canada, and it's not ideal necessarily in Canada, the what we're looking at for potential future. I'm an Australian citizen still.
mm,
I'm a queer woman. I'm
mm,
not trans.
mm,
Like I've got a lot of I'm white.
mhm.
That I have a lot of privilege, and I still don't feel
Yeah,
safe.
yeah,
I still feel less safe since I can't remember the date of the election,
right,
but whatever the date was, I still feel less safe now, and I'm currently in Australia
right.
than I did a month ago.
Yeah,
So I know that it's going to be common for most people in the queer community, and of course then people of color, and whole women in general. So it is important, and to acknowledge that, and then you can take some steps to take care of yourself around that.
yeah. And I think just one thing I just kind of want to point out is, and I was talking to my mom about this during election time, and I was telling her that, the party that won, I don't look how they want me to look. Like I'm not gay
Mm.
Hispanic guy. Like I'm not included in their ideal of, So,
Yeah,
and I think that, and I even talked to my therapist about that too. It's like I think that's what contributed to it as well. It's like I don't. Okay, that's cool. Like we can dream up of what you want things to look like, but I don't. I'm not that though. So like that's going to be a problem, So,
yeah,
and obviously, I think a lot of people feel that way too.
yeah, yeah. It's true, and when we can acknowledge that for ourselves, you can again take those steps
Yeah,
to take care of yourself,
yeah,
like emotionally
yeah.
and psychologically, but also there may be some practical steps that you can take
One
to take care.
example I want to give really briefly is I work with a finance coach, and the curriculum that we follow, I won't name drop, but the curriculum that we follow, the guy, he's well known, but he's a conservative. And I was on the call with my group, and I straight up told them, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work for me anymore, like the plan. And also, like, I told him, I was like, frankly, like, I don't know if like I am included anymore, like in that
Mm-hmm.
community. I'm like, I think that's what I said. Like, I don't know if I feel included or something. And my group was like, you're included, you're accepted here, all of that. Just follow the plan. Like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But that's an example of like, I was almost like gonna pull away from my finance group because I was like, okay, they leaned that way, and like I'm not that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard, isn't it? Because when when people have different political views to you, and those political views or the louder rhetoric around
Mhm.
that are actually anti you,
Yeah, yeah, that's
then
the
it's
problem.
it's really hard to feel included in a space. And I
I
didn't
think
mean you
yeah,
personally,
you
but
know,
like,
yeah. Yeah.
and I don't know that everybody, and we've discussed before we got on the call, we don't want to get into a political
Sure.
conversation, but we don't know why people voted the way they
Right.
did. And when their votes are anti us, that
Mm.
that louder rhetoric is anti us, it's really hard to see past that.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about that conservative finance group, you know they most likely voted more to do with finance
Yeah.
and economics.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you're not going to feel the message,
Yeah.
because what we
Yeah.
know is, like, whatever about the finances and the economics, but I'm a human being, and it feels like anybody who voted that way is voting against my human rights.
Yeah. And I think that's why that's really important, because I think that's the core of it. I think that's why it's so triggering, quote unquote,
Yeah.
is it's basically anti-me. But at
Yeah.
the same time, that's also a thought and a perception, right? Because you're
A
right, like,
fair one though.
yeah, 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 quite fair, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fair one because that is true. There is
Okay.
truth to it. Whether whether everybody who voted that way had a
Mm,
conscious,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, like whether
I
they were
see.
consciously thinking. I think a lot of people didn't. I think a lot of people justified that and went,
Right.
like, that's not why I'm voting this way.
Sure.
I'm voting this way for this. But voting that way, regardless of what their intent was,
It's
is
has
voting
implications.
against
Yeah.
some of our human rights. And so it is fair to feel that way. And also, I think, if you can, and I also want to acknowledge that this just isn't possible for some people, and that's also fair. But if you can, you know, try and expand your, because it's already done and there's nothing we
Mhm.
can do about the outcome now.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have said this a month ago because there was something that people could do, which is vote.
Mm.
Um, but now that there's nothing that we can do about the outcome of the election, you know, trying to remind yourself that not every single person
Mm.
um, voted that way with the intent of harming you, even though we know
Right,
that was a very
right.
direct implication of voting that way. Perhaps they didn't believe that to be true, and like, from what I've seen, through social media and everywhere else, of people that are saying that, even Canadian women saying that if they could have, they would have voted that way, and then giving their reasoning why. Like, I mean, I don't really understand how they got there, but it opened my eyes a little bit to go, wow, like,
Yeah.
you really believe that
Yeah, exactly.
this would be a good idea for these
Yeah.
reasons, and that it wasn't going to harm
Yeah.
our
Wow.
community.
Yeah.
They believe it wasn't going to, that's not
Yeah.
true, and like,
Yeah.
we know that it
Sure.
is. But that, whilst I was really shocked, it also gave me a tiny bit of, like, kind of, I'm not going to go as far as saying comfort, but I'm like, oh, okay, right. Well, maybe that means that there isn't that many hundreds of thousands of people that are just flat out anti-queer, and you know,
I
so they
think
can. I don't know.
No, I think that's a really good point, and, like, as I have tools to question my thoughts, and it's around here too, is, like, that's where I find the I don't know if freedom's the right word, but, like, um, is the idea that realizing that maybe they're not all anti-me, maybe they weren't even aware of it or weren't thinking about it that way, even though it has implications,
Yeah, or
and
don't
that's
believe it's
yeah,
got
or
those
they just
implications.
frankly don't believe it,
Mm.
and, like, so, and I can have compassion. Personally, I can have compassion for there's some tension in it there, but, like, I can have some compassion for someone who doesn't believe that. Like, we've all not believed things before. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. One
Yeah, and I mean, I intellectually, I can have some understanding
yeah,
around
yeah,
it, and I also want to acknowledge again my privilege. I'm not a person of color, and I'm not a trans
yeah,
woman. I'm not, like, I do have a lot of privilege, though, if I was living in the US, a lot of my rights would also be under
yeah,
threat right now,
yeah.
and could potentially dribble over the border, and all of that, and across the globe, like, we
Mhm,
also know that. So I just
mhm.
want to acknowledge my privilege in being able to do that, and I offer it with a very clear understanding that that's not going to be possible for many people, because
Mhm.
they don't have the level of privilege I have, and they just are not able at the moment, because their safety is so much more under threat,
Yeah.
I think. So it's important to acknowledge that, I think, and even for yourself, like, I know you pointed out the Hispanic man,
Mhm.
gay. but you still probably have some privilege that
Mhm.
some other people
Yeah.
don't have, so that they're not able
Yeah.
to be able to reach that
Yeah.
spot that you and I are able to
Yeah.
reach.
That's
So
true.
therefore, that's when it's really important to really kind of do that self-care around helping calm the nervous system and really taking care of yourself where you can, because
Yeah.
it will feel so much out of control. It does feel so, not
Mhm.
it does, it feels like we have such little control over what's going on around us.
So it sounds like, in essence, basically, we wanna calm our nervous system kind of the best we can and then take
Hmm.
practical steps, whether it's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because when we're able to calm our nervous system, we're more able to take those practical steps. We're more able to see things a little broader, a little more openly. We're more able to, what if one of the self-care things is to get better sleep, do what we can to
Mm,
get better sleep. That means when you wake up in the morning, you're going to be more able to function in your day to day, whatever it is that you need to be doing in the day. So, and in order to be able to sleep well, we need our nervous system to be calmer, because if your nervous system's completely ramped up, of course you're not going to have a restful sleep.
I'm just curious, Tracy, and in your work with people too, do you notice or do you think people are aware of when their nervous system gets activated? Do you think people
I
notice that or no? I'm just
I think
curious.
some people do and some people don't. And
Okay.
it will depend on lots of things. But so when I'm working with people around anything to do with the nervous system, I kind of do this picture. I don't know if you can see my hands, but like I have the ideal resting state is down the bottom, kind of Dalai Lama-ish, like a complete and utter calm. And then the top is when we're extremely activated. When we're either experiencing high stress or high anxiety, or even it doesn't need to be high, when we're feeling stressed, we're operating somewhere in the middle. That's what we perceive to be our resting state. So, we're not calming right down. So when let's say, sitting back on the couch, lying back on the couch, watching TV, for example, I don't find that very relaxing, but some people do, listening to music, whatever it is you do that is relaxing, just your normal everyday. I'm not talking about if you're meditating or doing proactive relaxation. Then you're kind of here in the middle. You're not calming all the way down. And so people can believe that they're relaxed. And I would say your system is still heightened,
Mm.
it's still escalated. Your nervous system is not at rest. So in
Wow.
that case, no, people don't necessarily notice. And I experienced this, like, not that long ago, about 12 months ago, had a well, several stressful situations going on. And my self-care routine kind of fell off the radar a little bit. I was still doing some things, but I wasn't doing all the things. And I didn't realize how my resting state had escalated higher and higher. So then what that means is when something happens to kind of trigger us, something a bit more stressful comes up, because it does, because we're humans, and life throws us curveballs, big and small. Then we hit the top, that high end, a lot quicker, and we're not coming down far enough. So, in answer to, as a long-winded way of answering your question, many people don't know that they're currently operating, on in a high stress or high anxiety kind of mode, that their nervous system is escalated. They know it when it kind of spikes. I think, oh, I'm stressed
Mhm.
out, or oh, I'm feeling really
Yeah.
anxious. Like
Yeah.
your body sends those
Yeah.
really strong cues. We're usually more aware of that. But when we're, like I said, when we think we're relaxed, we're not necessarily, particularly when we've got stuff going on like is going on now.
Yeah. Okay. Two more
Yeah.
things I want to touch on is before we kind of wind down in a few minutes here. We talked a lot about safety, but I am just curious. I do want to just like dive in one more time to that. Like, what is what is safety? Like, it's perceived, obviously, right? Like, and obviously there's physical safety and maybe even like social community safety. But like, do you mind
Hmm.
touching on that if you have any thoughts
Yeah.
around that? Like, what does that even
Yeah.
mean?
That is such a great question. So yes, some of it is perceived and some of it is actually just
Sure.
reality.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm glad you mentioned the word perceived, because when we're walking around on a day-to-day basis concerned about our safety, like,
Mm,
walking down the street and you see somebody and your assumption is they might not be a safe person. We all make assumptions
right.
and we all kind of stereotype in different ways. But you're walking down the street and you see somebody who you perceive could be a danger. There's that word. Like, you see them and you're like, I've seen a person that looks like that perpetrate violence, for example,
Yeah.
against someone
Exactly.
like me, or I've experienced it against me. Then that's your perceived sense of lack of safety, right? You're in danger, your perceived sense of danger or threat. That is just as powerful as actual danger. Our protective mechanism, our fight or flight system, does not know the difference between actual threat, actual life-threatening situations, and perceived threat. So our body is going to react the exact same way. And that's good, because that means our body is it's like on guard, and it's able to protect us, you know at the drop of a hat when it needs to. The bad side of it is we can often operate in that state of fight or flight, in that state of feeling under threat, feeling unsafe, more often than what we actually need to. That's the downside of it. And you mentioned like physical and social safety, and I would also add emotional safety.
Mm, mm,
And I think that sits, the emotional safety is connected in with that sense of safety in social environments. We might not, we might. So what a lot of people will do, if they don't feel physically under threat, or if they're intellectually able to rationalize, I'm not physically under threat, then they can sometimes kind of criticize or judge themselves because they still feel unsafe, and not really understand
mm,
why they're feeling
mm,
unsafe. And
mm,
that more sits with the emotional safety, I think,
mm.
or the perceived
Yeah.
lack of safety, when we're talking physical safety. So, that person, we use that simple example. You're walking down the street and you see that person, and all of a sudden your body's in panic. You go into fight or flight, and then your intellectual brain is kind of saying, well, like, that person hasn't done anything. They're not even looking at me. They're on the other side of the street. They don't have a weapon. Like, all of the different things you can justify. And that's kind of criticizing and judging yourself
Mm,
for that fear. But what's important is to understand that our system scans our environment 24/7 in the background, and it's looking for things that we have evidence of risk or threat. So if you have either experienced personally or witnessed, it could be a person that was wearing the same color sweater. Or if the person's closer to you, it could be the person wore the same cologne or perfume or deodorant or something. Your body is scanning for all of those things that it knows that it's accumulated throughout your life as potential threat, so it can keep you safe. So it's doing its job. So we don't want to be telling it off. We don't want to be telling ourselves off or judging or criticizing ourselves. But what you can do in those moments, if you are able to logically, intellectually say, oh, actually, but that person's, they're talking on their phone and they're not even paying attention to me, so really they're not a threat. You can acknowledge to yourself, oh, that person, I feel threatened by that person. probably because of something in the past, or possibly because of something in the past. You can literally thank your body. Thank you for keeping an eye out for me.
Mm.
Thank you for taking care of me. It appears at the moment that this person isn't actually a threat. So let's just take some deep breaths and keep walking.
Yeah.
So again, it's that acknowledgement and validation.
Yeah.
And I literally thank my body.
Yeah. I do too. Yeah. And
It sounds a bit funny, but it helps. It definitely helps, because your body is doing its job. It's
that's
doing what
what I
it's
was
meant to
thinking.
do.
Like your body's doing things, right? Like if it's your body's breathing, your body's perceiving, it's planning. Like it runs on autopilot almost.
Scanning, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It's your subconscious, so it is autopilot, scanning your environment. Now most of us don't need to necessarily scan for,
Mhm.
tigers running down the street or whatever, but our system still is doing
Right.
it.
Right.
It's just that the tiger looks a little different now
The
for
tiger.
many of us, not everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't make a joke. Okay. One last question I have for you. It's a little bit of a big question, but we can handle it however we want. It's kind of weird. Um, if I came to you and I said like, I don't want to see other people as like evil. Like I don't want to believe that anyone's against me. Like because I just don't like how that feels. Like I don't want to live in a world like that.
Mhm.
What would you say to
I would say great,
that?
because that is a way for you to take care of calming your nervous system. Because if you are walking into a room and
Mm,
looking at people that they all hate me, they're all against me, et cetera, what's that going to do for your nervous system? Not good things. The unfortunate reality is sometimes people might walk into a room and that
right,
might be true.
right.
So again, we want to acknowledge that.
Hmm.
What can you say to yourself in those circumstances? So one thing
Mm,
that I find helpful is to try and see the humanity in the other people. And I know that anybody listening, a lot of people listening to this are going to be saying, yeah, but some people I cannot see their humanity. And what I would say to that is stay away from those people as much as you can then. Because your intuition is probably fairly accurate. We don't need to put ourselves around people who, are going to harm
mm,
us, or that we feel that way. If you're in a situation where you do have to, like, say it's work, you have to show up to
mm,
work, then look at what can you do to take care of yourself in those situations and minimize the contact. And also trying to find some elements of humanity. I know there are probably some individuals out there that would be extremely difficult. And I don't know why I said probably. It's true. And it's true for me as well. But what we want to try and do is find something. And also, if you don't actually know, remind yourself, I don't know what's going on in this person's head. I also have a saying that I know, it's not mine. I stole it from somewhere, but I have no idea where, because I've been doing it for so many years. But you might have heard it, the saying that, what other people think of us is none of our business.
yeah.
And to some extent, we can hang on to that and remind ourselves of that. Now, again, when it comes to people being overtly discriminatory towards us in front of us, or abusive or aggressive or violent, and of course that's a completely different scenario. But when we're talking about walking into a room, and I think that's what you're kind of getting at, where nobody is being overtly horrible in any
Mhm,
form,
mm,
then and you're worried, then trying to remember, what we spoke about before. Even if these people did vote against us,
right, right.
maybe, for some of these people, it might not have been their intent.
Yeah.
I don't
Wow.
have to be best friends with those people.
Yeah.
I don't need to do any more than what is actually necessary as far as interacting with those people. Like if it's work, I need to interact with
Mm,
them on a professional level. Hold to yourself. What are your values? How can you hold on to your integrity? How can you continue to show up in the world in a way that aligns with your values and, what feels good to you, because that's the only thing you've got control over. You can't control other people's behavior. And how can you protect yourself from the situations that are more overt and that are and not kind to you? Maybe get one of my t-shirts that says practice self-compassion and wear it everywhere, so you're sending a message out to the world.
And sleep with it and everything. Yeah, I think I may have
Yeah.
to.
Oh, and you could, because they're really soft and beautiful, cozy material as well.
Well, thank you, Tracy. This is a big topic. We could go different directions and stuff, but I think this is good.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want our listeners to know as we're
I
wrapping up
feel
here?
like, the core message is really just about, practicing self-compassion, because there's so much out of our control.
Mhm.
And, if we can go within and really just practice kindness towards ourselves, and if you can, on the outside as well, like towards other people where you can.
Yeah,
I think, like you said, this is a really big topic and we could talk for hours. I feel like this is a really good start.
yeah.
It's not the only thing. If I was working with someone, if I was doing therapeutic coaching or therapy with someone, we would obviously go into a lot more depth and go a lot further. But given this is a one-way conversation, to your listeners, that is, I think it's a really good start. If people can, one hand on heart, one hand on belly. That's one of my strongest. Just connect with yourself. Try and, you know get in contact with your body, and breathe. Practice self-compassion. Yeah.
That's great. Um, I can see self-compassion as such a strength for you, and it's so interesting because I like part of me was like, we don't have time now, but I'm like wondering how you developed that. Like that's, like I can see it's a
Yeah.
true strength you have, and I think a lot of people, sometimes myself included, don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And
Okay.
I mean, we can certainly have another
Yeah,
conversation
we may
about
have
that. But
to.
what I will say really quickly about it is, it took a lot of practice, and I'm not always great at it either. Like I am
Mhm.
often, and there are times where I forget, and I eventually remind myself.
Yeah.
But I've had lots of conversations with people about, like, what is it, and even that itself
Yeah.
is really hard to define.
Yeah.
And so don't be hard on yourself if you you
Yeah.
struggle. But literally bringing your hand to your heart and your
Yeah.
hand to and
Yeah.
one hand to your belly
Yeah.
can draw in some of that. It really
Okay.
can.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I'll let you go in a sec here. How can we keep up with you?
Yeah, great, great. Thanks for asking, Andrew. So, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I've got a website as well. So my business name is Indigo Journey. My handles on YouTube as well. I forgot I do that now too. It's all Tracy.Indigo Journey. All of those things. And my website's indigojourney.co. O for orange, no M.
Okay, perfect.
If people want to see more about what I do, or take a look at the socials.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. Honestly, such a privilege having you here.
You're welcome, and thank you, Andrew. It's been great chatting with you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk
Bye
soon.
for now.